At Cranfield, we do a lot of research on project and programme management. Sometimes it's quite difficult, though, to try and explain how this academic research applies in the real world. And something we found is very powerful is to use stories. And so what I'm going to do is just over the next 2 to 3 minutes talk about how you can turn high levels of structural and dynamic complexity into a story that everyone will know and therefore understand the story and therefore understand what the academic work really means. And the story I'm going to tell you is the Battle of Britain, of all things. 1940, the UK on its uppers, the Nazi war machine rolling across Europe, and the only thing that was going to stop us being taken over by Adolf Hitler was the RAF. And so we all have these visions of Spitfires and Hurricanes and plucky young men shooting down the Luftwaffe. In fact, it was very different from that. We won the Battle of Britain because the guy who ran air traffic control, effectively, fighter command, understood high levels of structural and dynamic complexity. What do we mean by that? Well, structural dimension of projects, how many people are involved, how many companies, how many stakeholders, what are the forms of contract between them, what are the relationships between them, and you can go from low level, simple project, to high. On the other axis, we've got dynamic complexity, how fast everything is changing around you. So are your sponsors changing? Is the finance changing? Is the world changing around you? And of course, the challenge is what happens when you've got very high structural complexity and very high dynamic complexity. And that was the Battle of Britain. Now, you had these visions of Spitfires and Hurricanes flying around chaos. In fact, it was not chaos. It was a carefully controlled program. Now, the hero behind all this, the guy that actually controlled this program that was highly structurally complex and highly dynamically complex, was a guy called Sir Keith Park, head of Fighter Group 11 in the Battle of Britain. Now, he understood what it was all about. Number one, have a very clear strategy. His strategy was not to shoot down Luftwaffe planes. His strategy was to deny the Luftwaffe air superiority. Why did the Luftwaffe want air superiority? So that they could invade Britain by sea. And if you haven't got air superiority, you can't do that. So number one objective, not shooting down planes, not being brave, just being up there every single time a Luftwaffe plane comes in and to shoot at it. So eventually they would give up. So number one, strategic objective. Second thing he understood in this highly complex situation was you have to have communication. You have to know where you are and, more importantly, where the enemy are. And then you can create the interfaces between what you can control and what you can't control. Now, he had radar. Nowadays, we talk about having phenomenal internal communications and external communications. You've probably seen it on the movies. You'll see on the Battle of Britain film, Sir Keith Park looking down at this table where the girls are pushing on a map of Britain and France and the English Channel pictures of little blocks of enemy aircraft and our own aircraft, little headsets on, moving these things around in real time. So what Sir Keith Park did was actually look at this from behind a soundproof glass screen, and what he could do was look at the patterns. He knew where they were, he knew where we were. Now how would he interface them and make sure that every single battle, every single day, every single minute, because that's what it was down to, would actually be orchestrated to our advantage. The Spitfires and Hurricanes did not go up there looking for the Luftwaffe. They always knew where they were going to be, and they could be there at that exact time. So communication systems. And the view that Sir Keith Park had the whole time was the German view, not the British view. He understood you have to think outside the box. You don't think internally from your company out, you think externally in. He had systems, he had methods, he had control. But of course, the other thing he had and engendered in all of his people was trust. He knew he could not micromanage at that level. He had to set the agenda. He had to have the systems. And then as the message went down very rapidly, often in seconds, the pilots would trust that they'd be going to the right place at the right time. So he empowered his people right down to that working phase, which was the chaos of a dogfight. So it could be done in 1940. We won against incredible odds. Technically, on paper, we should have lost, but we won because one guy understood this combination of high structural and high dynamic complexity. He understood how an important and very clear strategic objective. Make sure you communicate, know where you are and where all the other players are, and therefore then empower people and trust them. As Erica Young once said in one of her books, Fear of Flying, if you don't risk anything, you risk even more. And what we've discovered in complex situations is that you must actually go out there. You have to take those risks. You have to trust your people, but you must have systems. So if you've got very, very complex projects and programs, go out there and you can fly. Thank you.